But don't tell anybody that, I guess.
Yeah, no. I think it was just more for me because I've been trying to get into like a Discord server and stuff, and I was just like, hey, does everybody have a link? Like, I don't necessarily go onto your video feeds and contribute or anything, so I didn't know how to get in there. And everybody's like, no, I mean, I don't know, you gotta watch the streams and stuff. And I was just like, oh, I just can't find it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
good, Eric? All right. And 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back to TAC Ops. I'm Greg. I'm here with Eric, as always.
Always.
And today we have on Jive Turkey, someone I've really looked forward to getting on this podcast. But first, real quick, before we start, the sponsor for this episode is the Commando store. Commando with a K. They're an online military surplus store. They lost internet connection. Again, that AT&T.
Dang.
All right, so hopefully we should be back online. But a little bit of technical difficulties. But
Excellent connection, by the way.
excellent connection.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, YouTube.
According to YouTube.
All right, Jive, thanks for being on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so you want to start out maybe just kind of going through your background a little bit, your service, your time in the U.S. Navy, maybe what boats you were on, and then how you got started up in YouTube.
All right, sure. So I'm a 20-year Navy U.S. submarine veteran. I served on a wide variety of submarines. First starting off with the USS Philadelphia, 688 class first flight. And then I did tours on like the Corpus Christi, went on to my Trident with the USS Maine Blue Crew.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Jay.
And and then continued on with the Pittsburgh, and then I got caught up in this training program at the end of my career where I just rode SSGNs. We have 4 of them now. Ooh. And I trained those sonar techs to learn how to maximize the use of their new ARCI 10 BQQ 10 sonar system. And I did that right at the very end of my career. So that's 20 years in a nutshell there. And during that time, at least around the end of that time, whenever YouTube became a thing, I began to think about doing a YouTube page based on Navy-related stuff. But I couldn't do that while I was active duty because they're very strict about your social media access and what you do whenever you're enlisted in the Navy, especially whenever you have a security clearance.
Right.
So I was like, all right, whenever I get out, whenever I retire, I'll start my YouTube page. And that's what I did. That's how I got into YouTube. And I just did some small stuff in the beginning. I did some history videos like the Battle of Jutland and stuff like that very, very early on. And it didn't go anywhere. It was just more of a hobby. But about 2 years ago, they really got big. I kind of blew up overnight with the submarine game called Cold Waters. And so I would stream Cold Waters on a regular basis, 4 to 5 times a week, and built an audience off of that. And we're kind of transitioning from Cold Waters into other naval games right now, but I enjoy getting online, doing live streams, and talking about my naval service, and that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I actually learned how to play Cold Waters watching your videos. And I know Eric's
me too, actually.
We both did. If I could tell a little kind of a funny story, back when I first started on YouTube, I had sent you a private message on YouTube, and I don't blame you for it because I know YouTube is they don't make it very easy to see when you get direct messages. It just kind of gets lost in all the YouTube comment notifications you get, and I'm sure you do too. I turn those off. I can't have my phone going off at all hours of the night. But I had sent you a message to see if we could maybe do a video together. I loved your stuff, just the wealth of knowledge, firsthand knowledge from actually doing it. But I never heard back from you. So I don't know if you ever got that or what happened there.
Well, I probably did get it, but I definitely never saw it, or else I would have responded.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm like, maybe he doesn't want to talk to me. Maybe the smaller YouTube, bigger YouTube channels doesn't want to work with the smaller one. But no, I get it, though, because I've gotten messages 3-4 months later. I'll go on there. You have to actually manually check and look through them. And I saw I got a message several months ago, and you'll have to apologize to the person for not responding earlier and everything. But Eric, I think you're going to kind of be leading this podcast, so this is right up your alley.
Yeah, man, submarines, I love it. Man, and I'm super excited to talk to you because we've never talked to you before, and I think you and I both have seen this kind of surgence in open source submarine, not necessarily intelligence, but just information in general, right? Just people finally coming out and being personalities, right? Like yourself, right? People finally have a way to connect with somebody who's on a submarine that's not an official captain or an official person, where they have to follow this line where if they say these certain things, they're going to lose their career or whatever, right? you have a little bit more
Yeah.
freedom where you're retired. You know, you can't really talk like myself. I was on a 688 flight 3, right? I'm not going to really talk about that. I will talk about Virginia classes because honestly, I don't know shit about them, but I can tell you basics, right? And I could talk about old World War II submarine stuff like that because I never really experienced that stuff, right? And I think it's really important where we have personalities like yourself where you can come out and actually engage with the media, because when it comes to submarines, I think one of the faults that we have is that it's so secret that people just make up shit, right? It's all, you almost get that Area 51 sense where what are they doing? They're not doing anything. They could be doing this, they could be doing that, and it's just open for interpretation, where it's really important where we have just a basic guideline. Somebody saying we're doing good shit, like we're doing good things with our technology and what we do, and I think it's really important for you to come out and talk about that. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on our podcast and just being that type of unofficial PAO, I guess is the way I like to look.
I'll take that title. Yeah,
Yeah.
Unofficial PAO. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The submarine service is a very busy service, as you know, because you were a part of it. We get no headlines, we get no credit, but we do a lot of very good work. And it just doesn't go reported because a lot of times where we're doing what we're doing is not public knowledge.
Right, definitely. I think
I've been in areas of the ocean where, you know, the territory that we're monitoring is claiming the waters we're in, but we're not violating that special boundary, right? We're not really violating any laws, but the integration between international boundary and a regional claim is not always the same line. There's that area in between.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where a lot of this work happens.
Right, yeah. And I think it's really important that you have somebody that can come out and talk about that stuff, because I actually talked to the Naval Chief of Information. I've talked to like some actual official PAOs and stuff, but they're not going to tell you anything. I mean, and they can't, and I don't want them to be honest. I think it's really important to have these side conversations where we can process information and we could talk about these crazy North Korean submarines. We could talk about all this stuff, but we're not actually giving out secret information because I don't have a secret clearance. They don't tell me shit. They're not going to tell me anything at this point. So if I say it and I guess it, I'm just guessing at this point. I'm Tom Clancy at this point.
Whenever I left the Navy, I left my security clearance on the table with them, and I went on about my life.
Is it difficult? I've actually talked pretty extensively with Eric about this, but is it difficult? Obviously, you know a lot of classified things, and from watching your videos, even when you give out the wording and the nomenclature and everything about, you say tube 1, shoot tube 1 at on a certain bearing. I think even one of the videos I watched, you actually said that this is not the exact wording you use, and I cannot say the exact wording they use. So is there a difficult balance in there, knowing what you can say, what to kind of smudge a little bit and kind of say it a little bit differently? Is that a challenge at all, or is the line pretty clear there?
Well, the line is clear for me. I know what I can and cannot say, but I've also forgotten a little bit of the official stuff, which works in my favor, so that if I miss out a step, well, then I can say, well, I didn't say the whole thing properly because I forgot a step.
Yeah.
But I do remember a lot of classified stuff, as a lot of other military people do. And of course, we compartmentalize that in our memory, and we just never go there. And whenever I'm live and doing something like this, I'm sure that I'm not anywhere near that. So like whenever I'm doing cold waters, I'll often joke about some stats and I'll put some information out about, say, a Victor class submarine, but I know that I'm at least 6 degrees of separation away from the actual classified numbers.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting too when it comes to cold waters or the new CMANO that's going to be coming out here soon, where they've gotten really on point with their information, where they've just gathered so much open source intelligence where it's actually interesting. We used to play the old games like Harpoon and stuff, but the numbers were just so ridiculous. They didn't make any sense, right? But now you have like an actual company who will spend $1,000 on a Jane's fighting ships, and incorporate that information into a game, and it actually makes sense now, and it actually is an on-point system.
Yeah, I think the new command game is going to be incredible, and I'm going to definitely stream it and play it. And you're actually simulating warfare in a modern environment. These are tools only first grade nations had before, and now it's a video game that's available for everybody. So I would definitely keep an eye out for this command that's coming out soon.
Oh yeah. I've I don't know how many hours. I bet I beat you in that game. I have over 2,000 hours according to Steam.
Okay, yeah, you probably got me on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I bet half of those hours have just been spent in the database they have, just looking at all the different missiles and torpedoes and ships and submarines and aircraft and looking at all the stats and everything.
Yeah.
Because it just goes so.
It's the poor man's James fighting ships for me. I mean,
Pretty much.
I didn't want to pay $1,000 for a new one, so I bought CMA&O and just went to the database. I got the picture update, so you have actual photographs of what everything looks like, and it's fucking fantastic. I mean, you can't beat it, especially if you get it on a Steam sale for like $30. Man, it's totally worth it.
The one thing I thought was interesting you were talking about, Eric, was that submarines, I guess the submarine service used to be much more secretive, right? Very few stories got out.
Right.
And now you're talking about today with, not really OSINT, but you used the word OSINT, and Jive Turkey and you and stuff like that are getting more of these stories out there and explaining and going into a little bit more detail than anyone ever heard before. I don't know, you see that book over there, Red November. So do you think that was kind of the start of it? I mean, there's several other naval books that started to come out after the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, I mean, books were the start, but now with the internet,
it seems
just
like kind
open.
of a progression, until what we have today with Jive Turkey.
I mean, a real basic version of it is just look at the ship spotters, right? I mean, when me and Jive were in, when you talk about ships movements, that was like golden. That was golden information. Might as well be crypto, right?
Right.
Like you will never talk about when you're leaving. You don't even tell your wife when you're leaving, right? You just give her general aspects. You don't even tell her at time. You're just leaving on Sunday, right? And so when it comes to this new information of open source, there's no real question anymore because there's a guy standing out there taking pictures of everything leaving, and he's posted on Twitter.
Right.
So you're going to be trending on Twitter within an hour because you left this port. Because I hate to say it, but I love ship movements. I like to post it on Twitter. I like to show what we're doing. We're not just this.
Welcome back. Go ahead.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. We had a little bit of technical difficulties here. We're back on, though. So I think Eric was just kind of going into the background of ship spotters today.
Yeah. So it's a whole different game at this point. You know, like I was saying with Jive, I don't know where we cut out, but it's really important when it comes to how we receive information at this point because back in the day when me and Jive were on submarines, ship movements were there. You don't ever talk about that, right? You don't tell your wife, you don't tell your kids. It's just really secret information because submarines are very vulnerable when they're on the surface, right? When they're transiting, 688s are not designed to be on the surface, right? This isn't World War II. We're not diesel powered anymore. We're not designed to be on the surface.
We get to that dive point as fast as possible.
Right, yeah. So we get out there as quick as possible, right? And that's because it's super dangerous for us out there because we can't maneuver very well, right? Ship movements are or were super secret, but now you have ship spotters where they're just like, I think they're just old. I mean, to be honest, they're probably just old Navy retired guys, super cool. Everyone I've met are just amazing. They're just really nice and just retired. They bought a really nice camera and just want to sit on the pier because they spent $200,000 on this house on the water, and they want to take pictures of ships and they put it on Twitter because they can connect with people. So at the same time, that poses a security risk, right? Where if this person is a dedicated source of ship movements, now we know that we can go on Twitter and we can watch this guy because he's going to tell us every time when the ship moves. Now we can put patterns together. We can say, well, we thought this ship was underway. Was it really underway? Well, it was, because now we don't even need a satellite anymore, right? We just got this guy on Twitter feeding us information. We don't need to put this expensive thing up to spot. So, I kind of wanted to get your take on that in relation to what you actually put out, which is, with your whiteboard videos where it's a nice dedicated set of information that's not going to put anybody at risk, right?
Right. Yeah. So I do something completely different than that with the whiteboard series, where I put out technical information that is not as detailed as a classified level would be. So more of a generalized version of specific submarine information, like the science and physics of cavitation. That's one of them that I talk about, and how submarine cavitation works with different propellers and whatnot. But I would never go as far as to say the USS Augusta, this screw blade, and this is what you can hear from her, because that would be crossing that line. So in my whiteboard series, I do talk about specific submarine systems, communications, active sonars, and then the physics behind the science that makes those systems work, whether it's electrical or like the active sonar waveform going out into the water and how it travels through ducts and goes into eddies and through fronts. I talk about all those that people really maybe not even know enough about to ask the question, how does that happen? So not only do I bring that question up, I answer it for them as well in little 10 to 15 minute videos on YouTube.
Yeah, that was my favorite. You had, I don't know if you classified it as part of your whiteboard series, but you had one playing the audio of, I think you described it as a viewer sent you a video and it had audio of an active sonar ping. And you went in and discussed all the details of it, just breaking it down between the CW, the continuous wave, and then I already forgot all the other different descriptors, but how the frequency will shift up and down. It's not just that ping, you hear from old World War II movies and stuff like that. It's much, much more complicated. There's a lot more information you put out there, and from that information you can get back more data, right? Like the speed of the from the what do you call it? Oh man, the Doppler shift, right?
The Doppler, yeah.
Doppler shift.
So I mean,
right?
that's a big thing with active sonar is they have scheduled keying now and FM pulses, and they can put out the scheduled keying in different directions. So they put out a different frequency left than they do to the right, for instance. And that FM pulse will give you the Doppler of the contact. So you get the range from the key, and you get the Doppler speed from the FM pulse. And you put those two together on your sonar display, and the operator doesn't have to do anything. It's all calculated for him now, which is amazing. And so all they do is hit the go button whenever they want to go active, and on their display they'll get the range, the course, the speed. It can even give you an idea of where the submarine's been. Give you a little track. And it's really, really cool now. That video was the SQS-53 Charlie. Active sonar.
I don't think you named it in there, so I'm writing that down. I'm going to do a whole bunch of research into that later on. But
maybe we should cut that part out.
Too bad we're doing it live.
No, live.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, though, after you released that video, after I watched it, I think I watched it maybe like 3 p.m, right? And I think I was up until 4 or 5 a.m. just searching for obscure YouTube videos of any divers or any different. I found several videos off the coast of Guam. Obviously there's a big naval base there, and different locations of different sonar sounds.
It's also really good diving.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Gorgeous.
And then not only that, but I was reading deep down in the comments, and you can sort through the BS. You can find some people who are on submarines, and they're careful, like not to give out any classified information. But if you can almost read between the lines. If you read enough information from this person and from that person, you can kind of start to put together a picture. But yeah, ever since I've seen that video, I've been obsessed with sonar. Just it's so much different. Like radar amazes me, but sonar, I think it's just a whole submarine field. It's just so hidden. It's underwater. You don't see it. It's just so interesting how they use sound underwater. And sound travels, 3 times faster underwater than it does in the air?
Oh, it's crazy. It's 5,000 feet per second. So whatever that equates to in sound above water.
And so you have that medium, so it's so much farther too.
Right.
Miles.
Because water, it's the magic of water not compressing that allows it to travel so far. Because if you start the wave here, the wave is instantly 5,000 feet away from you.
Right. Yep. And let's see. A couple other interesting things I did not know at first, and this is a couple years back, but it's really interesting how very rarely you ever use active sonar, right? If you're deployed.
Yeah.
Right.
Unlike radar, where you're using it regularly, because that'll give away your position. So it's almost all passive. You're just sitting there and listening. That's it.
Right.
So
whenever we go on mission, we actually take the time to tag out the active side of sonar. So the breakers are in the off position.
oh, okay.
There's just no way you can go active.
Yeah, you couldn't even accidentally turn it on.
Right. And
Right.
and
Not
even
even
even if you wanted to use it, right? If you're I've done this in cold waters and I can't find anyone, I'll just go active
Hit the
real
wrong
quick.
button.
No, I don't hit the wrong button. I do it on purpose.
Oh.
But the other interesting thing is just so the detection range, at least theoretically, would be twice as long, right? And it would take twice as long too, because the sound has to travel all the way from the active sonar, the submarine that's going active, all the way out to the submarine it's bouncing off of. That submarine will pick up that sound first, and that sound has to bounce off it and travel all the way back to that submarine.
Right.
So there's that submarine's going to hear it before you get the signal back. Yeah.
Right.
That was also really interesting to me.
Right. The great thing about that, though, is...
That's what we call two-way propagation. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The great thing about that, though, is submarines are so
And so the
slow,
problem
it
with
doesn't make that big
sonar-
difference. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
And going back to that, the problem with that is whenever you go active, people twice as far from what you can detect are hearing you. You know, because you have that two-way propagation like you talked about. And even if you do get a return, you may catch that target at such an oblique angle that the sound bounces off in a different direction than instead of right back at you. So you're really gambling whenever you're doing a search that not only is somebody within your detection range, that they're also at the proper aspect angle that you're going to get a good return on.
Right.
So a lot of times it's just not worth the gamble.
Right. Yeah, you won't even hear it coming back. That's the deal.
Right.
Right.
And then you've just given yourself away, and you don't know that.
Right.
You're now the target.
Right. So one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about, which was I guess it was kind of I don't even know how to describe it. I guess it was something they always told us, right? So if we have a diver in the water and we have somebody close, you could turn on active sonar and you could actually physically hurt that person,
Right. I
with
heard
an active
even
ping
kill him.
that close, right? You could actually kill the guy, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the United States Navy submarine sonars, I can't speak to the surface ones, have an interlock that limits the power we can transmit above a certain depth. So like when we're on the surface, the system won't allow the operator to select the higher power levels. So because of that interlock, you would not kill the diver, but it would never feel good. You're going to rupture his eardrums for sure if you got close enough.
Right. It'd definitely be a good deterrent. Right.
It would be a good deterrent, and that's part of the in-port security procedure. That if you have divers in the as a security violation, you do transmit active sonar. That's part of it.
Right.
But you don't kill them with it.
Yeah, definitely. I remember being in Norfolk, and you'd just be walking around on the boat, and they'd be doing active sonar testing on the surface ships, and it would just be deafening. You just hear it all day on watch. It was all day because we'd be down in the torpedo room, and we'd be doing maintenance on whatever, and you just hear dee, dee. You just hear this just constant ringing all day. But they're really powerful and super loud. I could see it being a deterrent. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, and the surface ships have room on board for more amplifiers, so they go to much higher power levels than the submarines do. But our power levels are also very high.
Right. I would think ours would be a little bit more specific too. They'd spend a little bit more money on us than the DDGs.
You would think, but no.
Shout out to the
I know
submariners.
when I was in the Navy, they always said we're going to do more with less, and I was like, I don't like this place.
Yeah, it's never good either. I mean, even if you work in the private sector, you don't want to hear that. I do have a question for you about. You said you were on an SSGN, which I find incredibly interesting. So you were training people on there. Were you actually deployed on one at times?
I didn't go on mission with them. I certified the crew.
Okay.
Because the end of my career was when the GN program came online.
Right. Yeah, that would have been later on.
Yeah.
So maybe you can speak to it a little bit. How did the use of sonar differ from on a tech, like a 688 to an SSGN? Is there, or even an SSGN, if you know that? Is there different techniques?
Okay, I'm sorry, you cut out right there. I missed the subject of this sentence.
Sorry. So between an SSG. Oh man, did we lose? Can you hear us?
Here.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Okay.
So between an SSGN or an SSBN and an attack submarine like a 688, is there a different technique to using passive sonar? Is there a different because with an SSGN or an SSBN, you're trying to hide and stay away. Where an attack class, you might be.
Well, see, the GNs are basically BNs with cruise missiles,
right?
So they still have that BN sonar aperture. Okay, the sonar array is still that, but we gave them the Q10 sonar system, ARCI, and so that was the big change for them. So they did have to learn fast attack tactics. They had to learn the new displays. Everything is so different going from Q5 and Q6, which was our older systems, to Q10. We had so many more tools in sonar, so much more automation and capability. A lot of the screens looked 180 degrees different than what they were used to. So that did involve a lot of training. We also had to teach them to be a little bit aggressive because the ideology or the mentality of the BN sailor is to go hide with pride, and they do that very well. But whenever you're in a GN, you got to be in theater, ready to go, and you're a lot closer to the action than what you would normally be. But the capabilities of the submarine that you're on in terms of evasion and counter detection are the same. In other words, it's not very good, because if someone catches you going active sonar broadside in a Trident, they're probably going to get you.
Yeah, and yeah, GN, that Tomahawk cruise missile doesn't have quite the range of a Trident. So you do have to get a lot closer. Yeah, for example, I haven't followed them, but you know how the U.S. Navy loves to. They love their photo ops.
A couple years, right there at the very end of my career, and the Navy wanted to keep me on and doing that, but yeah, after 20 years of doing sonar work, I was like, it's time to go to YouTube.
Seriously.
So the other question I have for you
it was a good time.
Is the difference between the sonar? I've heard a lot about the difference between the sonar room. It was an actual room on the 688 compared to the Virginia class, where you were right there with everybody else.
All right, are you guys there?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yeah, I lost you. I got you back now.
Oh man. So the difference between the sonar room, which from what I understand is an actual room on the 688, compared to the Virginia class today, how you're in there with everybody else. What do you think about that? What do you make about that?
I think that's really good for operational control. It's not good for the sonar operators. So it was good for the officers basically, because they're right there next to the officers. They can say, "Hey, we have this contact," and there's no use of the MC circuits. Like the 27 MC doesn't get used at all anymore in sonar because they're right there in control. But there's a lot more distractions happening for the operators now.
I can imagine.
I see that as being a problem. The operators have to be a lot more disciplined than they used to be.
Huh. Yeah, I can imagine that could be a lot of distractions, everyone moving around and different things like that.
Yeah.
I'm also, go ahead. Actually, go ahead.
I was going to say, sonar is more of an art in terms of with all the procedural compliance we have in a submarine, everything is lockstep, done by procedure. Sonar is one of the few places where you have the liberty to use your talent and experience to try things and make an effort to gain a contact that maybe the system hasn't quite figured out what it is yet. And so that type of concentration and talent takes a person's full attention and discipline. And so having that in control, like you said, with other distractions, navigation, the helms and planesmen, all the reports that come into control are still being overheard by those operators, even with their headphones on. And that's kind of a downside of that.
Huh. The other thing I think is interesting is how much they've incorporated technology from maybe the days when you started out until today. Obviously, computers have gotten a lot faster and a lot better. The thing, obviously, a big part of Cold Waters is identifying and classifying different ships and different contacts you receive, right? Mm-hmm. So nowadays, is it automatic that it'll actually be able to detect and classify a ship based on that, or can you not get into that? Or
well, no, I can. I certainly can get into it. The way it works now, it doesn't classify the ship. The sonar operator still does that, but we can. The new computers are so advanced. Before we even go underway, we can put in special frequencies and say, if you see these frequencies, put an alert up on my screen so I can go look at that bearing.
Huh.
And so if you put the frequencies for the Typhoon or the Delta 4, whichever one you're hunting, because you've got the intel that they're no longer in port, You could say that the system is classifying it for you because it gives you an alert long before the operator will ever see it on it. That's how sensitive the computers are now. And so before the trace comes in, it's already got the little tick mark at the top. And the operator can focus on that and say, yep, there he is now, and start tracking. And then he already knows what it is. If it's a class identifying frequency, which is what we put in the system, then we know that that's the Delta 4, and the computer gained it before the operator did.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things I hate about cold water is I gotta actually figure out all the lines. Like, I know there's a computer system that can do the lines for me. Damn it! I need an add-on or something that'll do it for me.
Automatic. Yeah, an update.
The automation in today's sonar systems is really, really good compared to what they were like when I was in.
The one of your real interesting videos I found was when you went through a Russian. It was a short documentary about a Russian sub, and I can't remember which one it was. I don't know if it was a Yazin or
it was a Delta 3.
Delta 3. Okay, and you actually showed a very, very short clip. Like the camera just pretty much panned right across it. But you paused it on there and you actually went in and you said, okay, this screen is a waterfall for this and that, and you went through the whole detail of it. That was incredible. I know you're retired now, but what do you make of the difference from what you've seen, I guess, between the U.S. and Russian technology level and maybe the quietness, if you call it that, of the submarines? Because I know they always said the U.S. submarines were quieter for a while. We were a little bit ahead of them, and that they've kind of caught up now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you can't get any quieter than 0 decibels. And we've been pretty close to 0 dB, unless something fails, obviously. But excluding an equipment failure, our Trident program is just incredibly quiet. And the 688 and the Virginia class aren't that far behind. The Russians have always struggled with being quiet. But the way that they do their submarines now, with the Yasin and the Bori class coming out, is they're very quiet for the first year to year. And then slowly, that's when equipment begins to get noisy on those boats. So after the 18 and 20 month period, we begin to get enough data from them to say, okay, this is Bori Hull 4, and we're watching her do her thing under the ice cap. But the first 12 months is a little bit scary because they are really quiet at first. Now, talking about the sonar systems, that's really where the gap has shrunk. Our technology on the American side of things is very advanced. I've already talked about the automation. The computers are gaining the contacts and telling the operators about them before it'll even show them on the screen. We're beyond that level now, because that's 10 years ago that happening. What they're doing today is like magic in our Navy. The Russians are where we were from that video, which was, I believe, 2018, so a year ago. Our technology was at that point in about 2001 to 2004. So they're almost 15 years behind us, 14 years behind us. And they're closing that. So come 2030, we may be at parity. We'll see how that goes.
Right.
And what do you attribute that to? Do you think it's just for the longest time I've noticed a lot of the most cutting edge and advanced technology was on the military side. Yeah. Whereas now kind of the private sector has really caught up and even surpassed, I think, the military in several aspects. The military, they don't have the funding they used to have, at least as a percentage of the GDP and everything. Right. Do you think that's kind of what it is, where China and Russia has been able to catch up with kind of off-the-shelf technology and from what's available to the private sector? Or do you think it's like a lack of funding on the U.S. side?
Courage. Already. It's a computer. If we are being, and that's exactly what they've done. So they're matching us on the hardware side. Where we really shine is our software in our beamformers is incredible. And so the people who make the sonar systems, the software guys, are our advantage right now. The other catch up, that's have in the sonar realm. Is catching up. China's really exploding its and they're capable ships and vessels than we've ever had. here shortly. They're going to surpass us,
Oh yeah.
and their technology is really coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no. I absolutely. Yeah. They're catching up. I really don't know much about Chinese submarines, but from their Air Force, missile forces, and stuff like that. Obviously, they're catching, and their Navy, they're catching up quick. So I'm sure it's the same thing with their submarine force. I had another question here.
Fantastic. Yeah, that too.
I've watched a lot of them. I've watched a lot of them when they tried to land and the launch pad, or what is it, the little boat they have out there, the landing
the
pad.
drone pad, yeah.
Drone pad, yeah. It's just vibrating so much from the rocket coming down, it just cuts off
Every time.
So I've watched a lot of them where I don't even get to see what happens. You just have to go.
Same problem with our YouTube stream. I'm sorry if you got some delays and we're cutting off all the time.
We might have to get an office.
We live in the middle of a big town, and we're trying to share with everybody else out here. So we're doing our best.
So going back to submarines.
Okay.
I do have a question for you. I've talked to several people. One person in particular, Xbox controller on the Virginia class.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
what do you make of those? I mean, do you think it's easier to use? Do you think it's
Well,
worth
for
doing?
me, no.
No.
But for this new generation coming up, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think that they use that anymore. I think that that's been changed.
Oh. Huh.
But it was used. You're right. That certainly was a thing.
Yeah, when I went down to the South,
They still use that. I told they got tired of them breaking and having to replace them. Maybe it was an industrial strength Xbox controller. I don't.
well, this is for a commissioning too, so I'm sure they were trying to play it up a little bit, and make it pretty interesting too. So it is what it is. But it was fun to play with it. I felt really uncomfortable using it just personally.
Yeah, you don't want to be pulling.
I don't want to be shooting missiles at somebody I don't need to. Some house on Groton's shoreline.
Yeah, so the non-penetrating photonics mask, that thing is really incredible. That's a cool piece of technology, and it's also a lot safer for the submarine crew where they don't have the big periscope actually going into where the people are. Because I remember that would always leak. We're always the only thing keeping the seawater out of the control room was grease, and so they would pump grease into the seal around the top of the periscope where it would come into the control room, and if that grease ever got a little bit loose you'd see all the streams of seawater coming down the stainless steel periscope.
That dude, I was that guy that would go up into control and pack a bunch of grease into that.
Oh, you were that guy.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I was that guy for a long time, for about 3 years, I guess, qualified OW, because I actually cross-rated to torpedoman about 3 years after I got in, after I qualified to run the EOG and work in the machinery room and all that stuff, and it was a whole different life, man. That's where I got the weapon side of it. That's where I got a real appreciation for the sonar techs, because I used to just talk shit to them all the time. This fucking guy is just
everybody does.
These guy just sitting on headphones listening to shrimp fucking click shit all day. But once I was a torpedoman, and I realized, like, okay, so I actually have to launch these things at things, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in a metal shell shooting something out of a tube. If it doesn't have a way to go, or it doesn't have a place to go, or a person that's going to put it on point, it's fucking useless, and we're going to launch this $1 million thing out of a tube, and it doesn't mean shit, right? So you really gain an appreciation when you kind of change over to a different department, right? So I went from engineering to weapons, and I realized, like, yeah, these guys are probably going to keep us alive. even though I could run an EOG and I could keep them alive, if it really got down to it, they're going to keep me alive, right?
Well, that's the thing about submarines. Everybody's keeping each other alive. You kind of depend on the whole crew.
Right.
There isn't room for a useless person on a submarine.
Huh.
Right, and I think that that's where the hazing thing kind of comes into play, and people kind of treat people differently, but at the same time, like, we're in a really tough spot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry if we don't talk to you nicely, but at the same time, if there's a fire right here, it could light a torpedo up, and we're done. We're all done. I can't have somebody that doesn't understand, or that's just too nice to get it right. So we treat each other differently on a different aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, hazing was definitely a big part of the Navy whenever I was in. Even though they were trying to crack down on it, it still happened. And, we saw a couple people wash out, doesn't necessarily from the hazing, but I'm sure the hazing didn't help. And I think what that does, and I'm not supporting hazing, let's make that very clear, but you can't have people who are mentally weak on a submarine. They need to be very strong, confident individuals, because when casualties happen, you cannot have room for doubt. You have to know exactly who you are, what you know, and you have to have confidence that you're going to take the right actions immediately. Because there's a window of about, I don't know, a few seconds when a casualty occurs, whether it's flooding, fire, anything, that if you do not take those immediate actions, that relatively minor casualty could become a catastrophe and kill people. And sadly, we saw that recently with the Russian Low Shark, the science vessel that the entire crew was killed due to a fire. And that fire spread through that submarine in, just over a minute. And it was just a real shame that they lost the crew to that. So having people that are strong and confident on the submarine is an important key to submarine qualification.
It makes sense. I mean, we had an intelligence worker on that we talked to, and he is also a psychiatrist. From an undisclosed Scandinavian country. But he did talk a lot about psychological tests. They have to make sure people can perform under pressure. It's a big, you really want to weed out, for a lack of better words, the what is it called? Eggshell skulls,
Yeah, the eggshell skulls.
Because you just can't afford to have them break under pressure, especially if they're undercover and they're on an operation somewhere. And I'm sure that's even almost to more of an extent when you have hundreds of people all on the submarine deep underwater, their lives at stake.
And we're not given a program to filter these people out. This is just us being assholes. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like, hey, look, man, like here's what we're doing. It's like being in the Army, it's being in the Marines. You're out in the field, you're doing this thing. Like, here's what we're doing, man. If you don't get it, then I'm sorry, man, but you got to get out of here. And here's what we're going to do to try to figure it out. So we may treat you like shit. We're going to put you through mental training. It's not going to be the funnest spot, and it's already not the funnest spot. But we're going to push you to that point because if a fire does break out, I don't want you to be the guy behind me who's supposed to open the valve or shut the valve and doesn't because he's freaking out or losing his shit, or he's supposed to be the sonar tech in the shack, maintaining that we have a clear environment and that we don't surface into a fishing vessel. Like everybody has their specific spot, and I need to make sure that out of these 100 people, every 100 person, let's say it's 100 people, right? Every single person, all 100 people have their spot and they do what they're supposed to do, which is if one person messes up, you're not only looking at 100 to 150 people losing their lives, but you're looking at billions of dollars worth of assets lost, a reactor lost. I mean, it's, another Thresher or another Scorpion at this point.
Yeah. Sadly, that's the case. Yeah. And in my career, I've watched two sailors, or two people. One was a sailor, one was a shipyard worker, crack under the pressure of being underway. And it's a hard thing to watch, but thank God it happened when there wasn't a casualty, to compound that. And we just got them off the boat as fast as we could in both cases.
I do have a question. So earlier on in the podcast, you were talking about how when you get out of port, you want to go to deep water. You want to dive as quick as possible. So on a typical deployment, what percentage of the time are you underwater? Is it almost the entire time to remain hidden? Okay.
Yeah.
I was always curious.
It's 99.9. The only time you're on the surface whenever you're transiting to the dive point, and then the other time is whenever you surface to pull into port again, or whatever port you happen to be at. The rest of the time is completely submerged.
Or if the U.S. Navy wants to do a photo op.
Yeah,
or swim call.
Yeah, or swim
I've had
call.
my share of swim calls. It's awesome.
Because I'm always looking for footage and stuff to use, and the U.S. military has a website with everything, and it seems like every day there's a new video or clip of almost every ship in the Navy. It seems like if you wanted to try to figure out where these at least the aircraft carriers. You could go on that website, sort it by the most recently updated, and you can pretty much find where any aircraft carrier is.
Yeah,
at
Defense
any
Hub.
time. Defense Hub. Yep.
Yep.
So as a sonar tech, what would be a normal day in the life for you? So if you're on deployment, and there's really nothing you're following, nothing you're really looking for, you're just traveling to your or to wherever you're headed out to patrol. What are you listening for? Like, what kind of things do you pick up? Do you try to classify and identify different random sounds you're picking up? How does that exactly work? Or like I said, maybe what is a good day in the life of a sonar tech on a typical deployment?
Okay, so if you're not on mission and you're just transiting somewhere, if you go on watch, anything that is displayed on your sonar display has to be classified. All right, and a lot of times that's a lot of detections. So you just methodically go through them one at a time and classify each one of the traces. You do that on your broadband display, you do it on your narrowband display. You log each one of these in the paper logs. I think they have electronic logs now, but you log them down. And then the moment you're done, let's say you have 6 contacts, you just classify the 6th one, you go back to the first one and make sure you're right. And then you classify them again. And that's the rotation. Classification is an ongoing process for the entire watch. We actually have a person that's dedicated to just classification on watch. So normally you have like a broadband operator and a narrowband operator, and that third guy, he's the classification / log keeper. And it's his responsibility to just constantly be verifying these targets. And also checking to see if the targets aren't behaving properly. Like, merchants like to go from one port to another at the most economical speed of their ship without too many course changes. So whenever we come across merchants that are just dead in the water in the middle of the Atlantic, or a few miles off the coast of a port but outside the anchorage, things like that are noted as being very suspicious, and we make reports on those. But if you're not on mission, the normal day is record the contacts, classify them, and repeat. And it makes for a rather dull watch, actually. And it's 6 hours tends to drag on whenever you're in that. But a day in the life is a different answer altogether. A day in the life is really quite busy. You get woke up very early to go on watch. And so you get up, you usually have a meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, it can be any time of the day, because you're on an 18-hour rotation. So whenever you wake up for your first watch, it may be breakfast time. When you wake up for the following watch on the following day, it's lunchtime. And so it kind of rotates around the clock, because you're on a 24-hour day in an 18-hour rotation. So there's always a 6-hour difference.
Okay, I was going to say that next, too. I do remember hearing that you guys go on an 18-hour rotation. Is that difficult to get used to switch from a 24-hour,
No. Because you have no sun and moon cycle, it's very easy. Your rhythm gets disrupted early, and then your body doesn't care what time it is.
Interesting. I've actually had a few, ever since I started talking with Eric here, I've had a few nightmares that I signed up for the submarine service and I go underway. I'm a pretty tall guy. I'm 6'2". And I don't like small spaces. I'll get claustrophobic.
Yeah, you wouldn't do well.
So I've had
the racks themselves are only 6 feet, so you would have like part of your knees bent when you were laying down, and
oh man, not be able to stretch out. So
you would not.
So in your normal day to day, then, have you ever, or while you're transiting, or I guess whenever, have you ever detected anything real strange that you were not? So you were saying you try to classify each sound you pick up. Has there ever been anything you have not been able to classify, or anything that was acting real strange?
Oh, yeah. So this is a really important topic. Unidentified submerged objects. Unidentified submerged objects are all over the damn place, or the oceans. They're, but we're required by the Navy's regulations to have a classification for everything on the sonar system. That's a requirement. So even if we don't know what it is, it becomes one of two things. Seismic activity, which is low frequency rumbling and earthquakes and tectonic activity, or biologics. And I was like, well, if it's from Mars, it's probably still a biologic, so we're going to call it a biologic. So a lot of stuff that is unclassified by the operator is logged as a biologic. Yeah. So yeah, the USOs, now the Navy's kind of opening up about the USO. And I'm kind of glad they are, because they've already released some footage with mysterious objects flying around from the F-18 lightning pod. I think you guys all saw that.
Yeah,
And
that and the
hopefully they
yeah.
open up the sonar world too. Now the sonar world is like super classified.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe they won't. But I can tell you as a sonar operator, I've logged things as biologic, and I did not know what it was.
Huh. And
So what I was always told, a lot of it's like glaciers, environmental, weird earthquakes, stuff like that, where it just travels for a long time, and it makes a weird creaking noise that sounds
or like an oil platform,
super
maybe,
scary,
or
you know?
drilling or something. I'm sure those can produce some kind of strange sounds if they're in different processes of drilling new.
Right.
If the oil rig is actually drilling and not just pumping out the oil, it does make a very low frequency rumble, and it's so low that you really can't hear it, but the sonar system can, and so it shows up. But if you were to listen to it, you would be like, I don't hear anything, and so that's what you log as seismic activity. If you want to get creative, you can call it an oil rig if you know there's an oil rig bearing. But what Eric was saying is what we usually do, is we just log it down as seismic. Now, Eric, if you ever sat in sonar and you looked at the bottom of the sonar display, you would see all those traces that break off to the left and break off to the right.
Right.
That's the seismic activity that I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. The only thing I heard that was really crazy was they brought me in one time when I was qualifying. They were like, listen to this. And I couldn't even tell you. I think we were going to the North Pole at that point. And you could hear a bunch of clicking. It sounded really odd. It was just click, 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 just thousands of clicks, right? And then it got really quiet. And then you heard them getting ready to blow sanitaries. And then when they blew the sanitaries, they were like, just wait about 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden it just sounded like the entire ocean just lit up with clicks. I don't even know what the clicks were. I think they were shrimp. They told me that it was, since we were blowing sanitaries, we were blowing shit into the water. The shrimp were getting all excited. And they were kind of commuting. They were like, hey, everybody's like, shit, there's hamburgers flying out of the sky.
Yeah, every time we pump sanitaries or blow sanitaries over, the biologics always get excited because that's what they eat. And that clicking noise is, it depends on what it was. It was probably shrimp.
Yeah, that's what they told
I'd have
me.
to hear it to be sure. But
Yeah, that's what they told me. It sounded like 1,000 clicks. It sounded like, that's what they told me was shrimp. So I'm going with that.
So this is kind of a little bit of a not serious question, but have you ever been following a Soviet submarine back in the day and heard them start singing the Soviet national anthem?
No, I haven't heard that.
No, like in the Hunt for Red October.
If you hear the national anthem, that they know you're there. That's not a good thing.
Right. So, but a little bit more of a serious question. So obviously when you go ultra quiet, right? At least I've seen in TV shows and in movies and stuff, they'll even take off their shoes, try to make everything as quiet as possible. So would you actually be able to pick up singing or talking on another submarine if you were close to it, or?
So voice-to-voice communications that goes through will never make it through that steel hull into the water. But if they pick up a microphone that's coming out of a speaker box in the overhead, bolted to the side of the submarine, then yes. So it depends. We'll never hear the crew singing like they did in the movie, but the moment they make the report to come to whatever speed or whatever, I've heard that before. That's how close we were, and that's how quiet the ocean was. We were in a period in the area of the ocean you could hear a pin drop, and we're in there. We're just trying to make sure we didn't get counter detected because we're like, we can't believe how freaking quiet it is outside. We shut down everything. And we're just trying to make like a hole in the water, watching the Soviets do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you just from personal experience, ultra quiet is a miserable experience for the crew because they are trying to be so quiet, you cannot do anything. You
can barely breathe.
Like, you are not allowed to do shit.
There's no showers. There's no meals.
There's nothing.
You have like cold cut. Yeah, Eric knows.
Paper plates, like nothing. You can't close the toilets. It's nothing. I mean.
Yeah. Good luck trying to take a. Yeah. And there's no showers, like I said, and that's a Sonartech's favorite thing is a shower. Turn off the showers, I start to get mad.
So when you're saying that you can hear the things coming out of the speaker box, is that because those things are actually bolted down and attached to the submarine, so the sound it's making is actually kind of vibrating the whole hull a little bit compared to somebody
goes through
in
the
the
steel
submarine?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So it's vibrating more, and you can pick up that sound.
Right. That's where American technology got really great. Was we had floating plates.
Oh yeah.
So everything was floating on rubber
so
mallets.
nothing would transmit from the inside to the outside hull.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess one obvious question we could ask in the beginning, if you want to go into detail, where exactly did you get the name Jive Turkey? I'm sure there's a story behind that one.
All right, so the Jive Turkey nickname came from my elementary school bus driver. I grew up here in Florida, Swampville, in the center of Florida, and I grew up in a very small town, very poor town, and I went to a very rural schoolhouse. The town is so small, we had like a schoolhouse for high school and another schoolhouse for everybody else, like elementary school kids. And so our bus driver would always scream out to sit down and shut up. And whenever he would talk to me, he would tell me to sit my Jive Turkey ass down because I was always cutting a fool. And so the name Jive Turkey stuck from my elementary school up until into high school. And then, once I graduated, I finally got away from that nickname. I was like, thank God. And then whenever I made my YouTube account, I was like, you know what? I didn't want to use my real name. So I was like, what about Jive Turkey? I was like, all right. And, it kind of worked out because Jive Turkey is kind of a fun and it's an off-putting name. It's not that serious. And so people are disarmed and they're not coming at me with, okay, let's see how much he actually knows. They're coming here for a good time because even though I put out a lot of good information on YouTube and on Patreon and whatever, I'm also here to entertain them.
Right.
I try to do both.
Right. Yeah, definitely. The same thing with me. I was online. I was trying to figure out how am I going to make my online name. And I was like, I don't know. I went through this crazy ceremony with King Neptune. I'm going to go with King Neptune. 767 is the boat I was on, so I'm just going to go with that, right? And it's stuck with me ever since, and I've been using it for 5 years now, I guess.
I always imagined that you were the King Neptune in the ceremony.
Yeah, that was my idea, right? Because I went through Blue Nose, I went through the Shellback, Golden Dragon, all that stuff, and
all right.
Well,
the whole deal.
Well, it was funny too because a lot of people asked me about it, like, "Oh, you went around the world? You did all this yeah, I mean, we went to the North Pole, so when we went up there, I got my Blue Nose, and then we went around the world up there." But it only took me about 20 minutes to go around the world. So I got my Shellback while I was up there. Yeah, I got my Order of Magellan while I was up there going around the globe. Man, I got it all.
now, maybe for the people listening, do you want to kind of describe what one or two of those things are in a little bit more detail?
Oh, so like the Blue Nose ceremony. Well, just Blue Nose, Golden Dragon, Shellback. These are all naval ceremonies that go, not just U.S. Naval, they go across every country as far as I know. They're just really old traditions where Blue Nose, for example, is when you go up on top of the Arctic Circle and you're up there for a long time, you have to go through this ceremony, which I'm not going to talk about because it's a secret ceremony, right?
Yeah, it's secret, yep.
And
we're part of the club now.
Right, and so you're same thing with the international date line. Same thing with the going across the equator, right? There's all these ceremonies that you're now a sailor. Nobody else is going to do this. You could do this on an airplane, but nobody gives a shit, right? You are now part of this community where you sailed across this thing that only so many people have done, right? Especially when it comes to Blue Nose. It gets really important.
And it goes in your service record, too. It's in your record that you've crossed these lines.
Right.
And does that looks good on your record then? Or
there's a ribbon.
Well,
yeah, I got a ribbon for Arctic operations.
Well, Arctic operations ribbon, but that's the only one. There's none for the equator.
Yeah.
Huh.
But you get this you get this big plaque, and I actually I think it's through Tiffany's. I think or one of those collections places. But you can get this plaque, and I got 3 of them. I got the Golden Dragon, the Blue Nose, and the Order of Magellan. That I get to put up in my house, and it looks super cool, right? It's got a little sticker from the captain because the actual vice chief of naval operations, Admiral Burke, was my captain when I went on the ISEX.
Oh, really?
So like the second in command of the Navy at this point was my captain. So he's got his signature on my Blue Nose certificate. So man, there's a lot to it. It's super cool, man. It's totally worth it.
Interesting. Yeah, I know there's a lot to it. I've seen different. I've watched a lot and read a lot. Different documentaries and stuff, how they cross the international date line or different things like that. They have different ceremonies that go on.
We cheated. We did it all. We did it on this little loop.
You cross every line of longitude real quick. Huh?
Yep, all of it. We did all in a little loop. Took us about 10 minutes.
So after 20 years, you said, right? 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
Do you think you'd ever sign back up again, or is that in your? Because I know from talking to Eric.
Yeah, if shit went down.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if like we got in a real shooting war, I could definitely put a set of headphones on and do my job. I certainly could.
Right.
I mean, still maintain a certain level of skills. And something that the whiteboard series has helped me do is keep my skills fresh, just by talking about them and not letting them wither on the vine. As I get older. I'm not in the physical shape I used to be by any means, but I could still.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think any of us are.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I don't necessarily want to blow sanitary tanks, but I'll run AOW. I'll do it all day. I mean, if it came down to it, I mean, we got to defend the homeland, right?
That's right. I mean, technically, I'm in Fleet Reserve. It's not technically. I am in Fleet. And that's what Fleet Reserve is for, is if we've run out of sailors because we're losing a big war, Fleet Reserve gets the call.
Because
we'll see.
Yeah, because I've talked to Eric a lot about this, and he's had it's an interesting, I don't know if you can call it state of mind, a love-hate relationship almost with it. I mean, looking back on it, you cherish those memories, right? It's something that you did in your life and you're very proud of.
Yeah.
But at the same time, while you were in it, you talked about how
it was fucking miserable.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
So it's an interesting dichotomy of different.
I mean, we had people that were trying to commit suicide and shit. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was a horrible experience.
Oh wow.
I mean, it was a rough time. We were on a hellboat. We were in dry dock, and our captain got fired for the ELTs forging reactor water samples and shit. I mean, it was fucking ridiculous. I mean, we had.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we were in a real bad hellboat. We had 70 people at one point. I mean, over our dry dock experience, try to get off the boat, and they got off the boat for whatever reason. I mean, we lost half our crew. I mean, it was super miserable. And I'll give you an example. So we went from who is now the vice CNO of the Navy, Admiral Burke, who was my captain, who was amazing. Took us out on the ISEX, kept me safe. He was a fantastic captain. He was one of the best leaders I've ever met. And then we went to our next captain, which was Commander Portland. And he was the next guy who took over, and he was the one who got fired for the ELT's forging signatures and shit. And it was all based on leadership. I mean, he was a fucking miserable person. The very first day he showed up on our boat, we were already in dry dock, and he came down to cruise mess, and we were still eating on the boat, so we were still eating in cruise mess, and it was hamburger day. It was Friday. So we were having hamburgers. It was hamburgers, fries, whatever, right? Just one of the best days you could have when it comes to eating on the boat, right? So we had curly fries, and he came down, and he came into cruise mess on the first day. I didn't even know who he was, and he goes, "So you guys are eating curly fries?" And I said, "Well, yes, sir." And he's wearing his insignia, so I know he's important. I don't know who he is. And he goes, "Well, you guys are a bunch of faggots. You can't be eating curly fries. Only faggots eat curly fries. No more curly fries. No more A1. None of this shit. We're done with this."
Now, real quick, just for the YouTube moderators out there,
I'm just
that you are quoting what somebody told you.
I am quoting a Navy commander.
You're not using that word in any other sense.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm
just
sorry.
want to be clear to that person reviewing this video and seeing if it's advertiser friendly or not.
Yeah, don't demonetize us. I'm just telling you exactly what an official Navy person told us. And so I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And I shit you not, Never had curly fries ever again. The entire time he was on our
So-
boat, never had curly fries.
Is it okay if you shared what year this was? Was this 2010 or?
So this was 2006.
Wow.
Yeah, 2005, 2006. So right
I was
after.
in the Navy. Yeah, I was still in. I'm shocked because the Navy got real politically correct at the end of the 90s.
Oh
So,
no! He was, and it was. But this was like him talking to us personally, and we didn't know what to do. I was just an E3, E4 unqualified guy. Oh no, I guess I was qualified at this point. I was just barely qualified. And here's the captain, the new captain. He's calling us faggots because we're eating curly fries.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god! Like, what do we do? And we didn't have any A1, no ketchup. No curly fries. I mean, he was a runner. So his deal was, we are going to make submarines super fit. So all these sonar tech guys who were super fat, all these A-gangers who were super fat, all these guys, fuck that. We're gonna make them run. And so that's how he introduced himself to us.
Huh.
Wow.
And it was ghastly.
Well, I tell you what, the Navy gets rid of captains like that.
And they did.
'cause
And they did.
Stacy.
And,
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There you go. I called.
Right, and they did. What
did.
happened was he's such an asshole that the ELTs wouldn't turn in the reactor paperwork to him.
Because
They were like, "Fuck him! I'm not gonna return this. I'm not gonna turn this paperwork into him because he's gonna fucking shit on us. He's gonna fucking make us feel like crap. Fuck it." And they just
Yeah,
forged
the
a
problem
signature.
with that though is the ELTs get in trouble too, and that's also nucleonic stuff. You do not mess around with that paperwork.
Right. I mean, and
Just does not play.
And I hate to say it, but those guys were like super amazing guys. I mean, all those guys that got in trouble for that shit were super
Yeah,
legit, and they were trying to do the best they could, but they hated that guy so much, and they had no exit. Because once you once you volunteer for submarines, there's no unvolunteering, right? It's like spec ops.
you can't.
You're not gonna get out if they're gonna spend this money
the
on
only way
you.
you get out is either in a box or medical disqualification.
Right.
That's it.
And so when I talk.
Say this, anyone listening, don't get AT&T. Don't do it. If you can avoid it, unfortunately in this apartment complex, AT&T is the only option we have. Don't do it.
Oh my god!
I think we lost the opportunity to ever have them. Verizon, if you're interested, I was very happy with or Spectrum. I like Spectrum service.
Yeah.
If you guys want to sponsor us, don't get AT&T.
Yeah, we live in Texas, so they monopolize the fucking data. It's ridiculous.
Anyway, sorry to cut you off, but switch. I think I was talking about switching topics a little bit. You're talking about suicides in the Navy. With the recent incidents on I believe the George Bush.
Yeah,
The
three
aircraft
suicides in 1 week.
Right. Did you hear about this, Jeff?
Yeah,
I did hear about that. So sad.
Yeah, one chief, one first class, and one recruit, I think.
So do we
Man,
know?
I'm surprised that the chief petty officer, but yeah, do you guys know any details?
I don't.
No, I think they were all just aviation guys that were just in rough spots. But
Wow.
I mean,
I did read in the story that they were not related to each other.
No.
The incident.
no, they definitely weren't related. They
Not
were
that
just,
that makes it any better, but I mean,
I think that was what was pretty rough about it was that they just had three different ones that were unrelated that all happened at the same time. With the carrier, you have let's say 4,500 people,
roughly,
I guess.
yeah.
So 3 people's a small amount, but it's still just a huge amount when it comes to suicides, and especially they're active too.
Yeah,
Man,
that's so sad.
it's one of the things we face in the submarine community, which is you hate this so bad. How do you get out? Right? We're not going to let you out. You volunteered for one of the most ridiculous jobs on the fucking planet. It's like It's like spec ops. It's like you're a Navy SEAL. We've spent so much money on you, getting you here, but you don't want to shoot somebody. Like, what do we do?
Too, yeah.
What is the way out, right? And when it comes to submarines, you're not shooting people. You're not doing crazy ass shit. Most of the time, you're just being a ninja, right? You're just being secretive. It's scary,
Or
but
the
it's
back
not
room type stuff where you're just working in the torpedo room or you're working as a sonar tech and you don't really have. I mean, I can't speak to it necessarily, but my opinion, my viewpoint on it would be maybe you don't have that same sense of achievement I could be wrong, but
Right.
as a special ops person who actually is going in there and they're sneaking in to go get Bin Laden or whoever it is.
Compare it to a police officer. Like we're not like we're not like in your face, right? Our job is we are ninjas. We are fucking way back, just observing.
If you do your job, no one will know, right? That type of thing.
Right.
They only know about you if everything goes wrong.
Nobody should ever know what we're doing ever, right? That's the whole submarine community, right? Whereas when it comes to the Army, they're right in your face, or the Marines, they're right in your face.
Or the Coast Guard. Coast Guard's always on social media with all the drugs they bust.
Oh,
this guy's fucking beating on the top of that narco sub, right?
I love those videos.
Yeah, I mean, those guys do things that we don't do. But at the same time, let's say you wanted to qualify on submarines, but you wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Like, that's a whole different aspect. And there's huge issues with the Navy where they get you to do things you didn't want to do, right? I'm a nuke drop. I should have never stepped foot in nuke school, but I passed this test and they said, you should do it, right? And that's what I did, right? So now I failed, I became an A-ganger, and then I qualified to be a torpedoman. So I kind of got this whole aspect, which is, in my opinion, great. But at the same time, what do you do if you don't want to do that? If you're a submariner, how do you get out of it?
You just don't re-enlist. That's how you have to tackle it. And so if you do re-enlist, like, that's your fault because you knew. But the first enlistment, I give those guys a bit of a break, except whenever it comes to qualification, they have to qualify.
Right.
But once they re-enlist, it's their own fault if they don't like it, you know.
Right.
But you know what? Everybody has a bad day too. I had many of mine, you know, especially in my last enlistment. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You know, I was just trying to make it to the 20-year mark some days, you know, and then the other days it's fantastic. So if you want to talk about accomplishment, I know from the Sonar perspective, I feel very accomplished whenever I snatch that submarine from out of the frequencies that everyone else called a merchant. And yes, there was a merchant there, but do you know who else was over there? That Alpha at 40 knots was over there, you know, and I saw that frequency go by and snagged it.
Interesting.
Now, the problem with doing that is whenever you catch that submarine, you then have to spend your entire off watch putting together a package, and it kind of sucks.
Right.
But it's still a sense of accomplishment that you caught somebody. Because like you said, we're kind of like police officers. We're watching other nations, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Now, you don't have to go into any details because I'm sure it might be classified, but has there ever been that moment where you've detected an alpha, like you said, or any other submarine where you're like, holy shit, you know, things are about to go down, like this is looking really dicey, like, you know, war might break? Or has there ever been a moment like that? And if you can,
I don't
maybe
know about war.
Okay.
God, yeah, there's been a couple moments. So I'll try not to rush through these, but there was one deployment where we had one mission to track one submarine. And this submarine was a Yankee Stretch. It's decom now, so I can tell you all about it.
Ooh.
But the Yankee Stretch had a moon bay on the bottom of it.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah, like something out of a James Bond.
Seriously, K-129. We're talking. Yes.
Yeah, and in that bay, they would dock another smaller submarine, a science research submarine is what they called it, called the Paltus. And this is a very deep diving, you know, it could go down to the Titanic if it wanted to, submarine with a lot of mechanical arms and saws and claws on the bottom. And so it looks a little bit like a shellfish with, you know, it's very small and round and dense. And then it's got all these spider-like appendages. And we spent 2 months, well, not 2 months, about a month and a half, watching that Yankee Stretch work with the Paltus, manipulate and basically wiretap our transatlantic lines. And we were logging the lines that they were screwing around with, and so that we knew that any communication on these lines was going to be compromised.
Wow, that's crazy. I can't believe that.
Yeah. So, and then that also leads to a lot of opportunity because we can put false information on those transatlantic lines and they'll think it's true, you know? So we all watched them do that. And the fun thing about that was they had an escort. It was a Victor 3 that went out with them. The Victor 3 ended up getting relieved, but so we had to stay away from the Victor 3 while also maintaining track on this Yankee Stretch as it screwed around with our communication lines. And that was a real challenge tactically. And it was a lot of fun.
So, well, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I love that.
Blow my mind at this point.
Yeah, Eric and I are smiling at each other. That kind of reminds me of. I'm sure you're aware of Operation Ivy Bells, right? Where the U.S. went did a similar thing. So you're aware of that, and then you can start. If you're aware it's going on, you can start sending false information back and forth to throw the Soviets or Russians off.
Yeah. The Ivy Bells was a little bit before my time, but it's the same type of stuff. Yeah.
Huh.
We did what was it called? Holy Stone? I forget the name. I want to say it was Holy Stone. Someone on the internet's going to correct me if I'm wrong, though. Anyway, but that was part of the mission I was on. I spent most of my mission time, if I wasn't just out punching holes in the ocean, in the Barents Sea and the Norwegian Sea. So up and around that area was my stalking ground.
Interesting.
Nice.
One of the more exciting things that I had ever seen, and there was a couple of these, but there was one where we were on station, we're watching the Russians do war games. So we know it's war games. We know there's no real ordnance on these torpedoes,
right.
But there is real ordnance on things like missiles and rockets because they were doing live weapons fires with that. But we're watching, it was an Akula 1, like the old school Akula, and a Victor 3 were tactically trying to find each other, and we're in between the two of them. They can't hear us, but we can hear both of them. and so we're kind of getting out of their way to let them play their little war game. And sure enough, the freaking Akula launches a damn torpedo at the Victor 3, and I'm sitting there in Sonar going, oh shit.
Oh my God.
What was this thing? If the torpedo had turned its sonar on at its enable point early enough, it would have definitely saw us.
It would have been like
right by us.
What is this?
And then it turned its sonar on behind us. And we were like, holy shit, that was close. We watched this thing go right down the side of the submarine. It was crazy.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we're on station doing things like that. We have these writers from the Office of Intelligence, and they do this stuff all the time. They go from boat to boat. Any boat that's going to the Barents, that's the boat that they get on for that mission, which is 3 months usually, 3 to 4, depending if you get extended. And they're like, yeah, we saw this happen back in June. Yeah, it was like every day for them, but it was a very special event for me because I about shit a brick when I saw the torpedo launch.
Seriously?
Wow.
Oh man, does cold waters give you PTSD?
I was gonna say, yeah.
Jesus.
So shifting topics a little bit, it reminds me of your cold waters videos. How would you say that there's a level to realism there with how you evade torpedoes? If you can speak to that. I've watched you.
Well, I do use a real evasion technique called porpoising in the game. Now, the game isn't modeled 100% correct as a real submarine would move,
right.
But it's kind of close. It's in the ballpark. So you can see a real evasion technique. I also use real tactics, real target motion analysis. The game doesn't do a good job of showing that. So what I do in my stream is I kind of explain what I'm doing as I do it so that the audience understands what a real tactical naval search looks like. And I'm kind of inconsistent on that, so you can't just go to any stream and expect to see that. But I try to, at least at some point during the video, and some of these are 2 to 3 hours long, say, hey, this is a real tactic here. But the most common one I use in the video game, because it works in a video game, is called porpoising, and that's simply depth changing.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed you'll change your depth, and then you'll try to turn real sharp.
Just dive deep.
Change course. Yeah.
Run silent, run deep.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, that's why I really like you. There's a lot of other people out there who play video games. Obviously, people who play is World of Warcraft. I was going to say World of Warcraft. Does that even say World of Warships? Even there's a few people who play Command, Modern Naval Operations, which I really appreciate those people playing. But it's a whole different thing when you have someone who's actually lived it and done it. Been there, done that type of thing.
Right.
With Jive Turkey here. I know you, Eric, wanted to get into this story about the tiles, the Anechoic tiles. You want to get into that a little bit? Because there's some news that came out about these tiles, and I'm not fully read up on the topic, so if you want to bring it up.
Yeah, so one of the weird things that's been going on with submarines in general are the coatings, right? So we have these rubber coatings that go on the outside. We call them SHT tiles, and they're just these square tiles that go on the outside, and they're supposed to absorb sound that hit the boat. Right? It's rubber instead of steel. Right?
Almost like a stealth coating of an aircraft,
right.
like a stealth aircraft.
Basic sound principles, right?
Right.
It hits rubber instead of steel, won't bounce as hard. So ever since when I was in 2003, the tiles just fell off. Right, these rubber tiles would fall off all the time. It was just this. It was this joke. You'd pull back in, and there was two things that happened. One was you would have a skirt. You would have a moss skirt, just like it looks like this Hawaiian skirt that goes on the outside. Just this moss skirt because it just grows on the outside, and you'd have tiles missing. Nobody really questioned why the tiles missing because they were missing on everything. Every boat always had tiles fall off.
Going
right?
back to the real quick to make a comparison, it reminds me a lot of the space shuttle, for example, where they had the heat shield, were tiles that were just kind of glued onto it, and they come off every time. In fact, that's why the Columbia was destroyed on re-entry, because these tiles came off. It was hit by a piece of material from, I believe, one of the SRBs. Anyway, the tiles would just fall off, and that would obviously hurt the performance of it.
Right, but I think that the spaceship tiles are a lot different.
Yeah, oh yeah,
those
absolutely.
were a lot more important.
Those were, you're going to burn up and
you miss one tile, you're going to die. Right?
You're right, yeah.
Where ours fall off all the fucking time, and it doesn't really matter.
Right. As long as you're not in a war or something where it's really going to be life or death.
Well, that was the thing where it's like all these tiles fall off and nobody cares. Right? And nobody seemed to care at this point. We don't know why the tiles fall off. They just keep falling off, and they've been falling off for years. But all of a sudden, we have a whistleblower that says that HI Industries is saying that they forged test documents and said that they shouldn't be falling off, but they are falling off.
And do you know why? I mean, was it the wrong type of material being used? Why are they?
Well, they don't know. At this point, it's just a lawsuit because it's just been this fucking issue, and now we have a whistleblower that's literally whistleblowing on this one subject of just tiles falling off.
Yeah.
Right.
So Jive, you're a sonar tech.
Uh-huh.
That's something the Russians use too, right? These SHT tiles. Now, if a Russian sub was missing a bunch of these tiles, is that something you'd be able to pick up?
Yeah, because they have the same problem we have with the tiles falling off. The Russians use a different kind of SHT than what we do, but they, like I said, they still have the same problem. And the reason for that problem is the dynamic forces on a submarine as it dives and surfaces again. You know, the diameter of the submarine changes just a little bit, and that slowly weakens the hold of that adhesive and the bonding that it has with the hull. And so, you know, I don't understand the lawsuit aspect of it because whenever I was in the Navy, it was expected. We were like, okay, we lost that one, replace.
Right.
You know, so this whistleblower, it makes me wonder if it is a whistleblower and that's all, that's fine. But is there maybe another motivation behind this lawsuit besides something that we took as a normal event?
Right. It seems really odd because they're targeting, it seems from what I understand, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard or Newport Naval Shipyard, Newport News. Yeah. But we've seen it on all of them, ever. I mean, we see them on UK boats. We see them on Russian boats. So it seems really odd that this is...
Maybe it's the fact that, I'm speculating here because I didn't read the report and everything. I'm sure there's information out there that we're just unaware of. But is it that this manufacturer or this contractor is claiming that they're not going to fall off? Like the material they're using, you know, it's good. It's going to stay on. It's going to remain. Everything's going to be good.
Right.
They're signing off saying it.
Right. Did they say it's not supposed to fall off and they lied to us?
Yeah. Huh.
Well, that would be a different case.
Right, yeah.
And that's also an incredible claim to make because that's never going to happen.
So is that...
As soon as they stop submarines from compressing at depths, then they can talk about keeping the SHT tiles on. But physics is physics, man. And it's just going to compress the submarine whenever you go deep. And those SHT tiles are going to come off. And that's what happens.
Right.
Now, as far as how vulnerable you are, technically, yeah, you're a little more vulnerable if any sound is being radiated from where those tiles were. But you would have to lose a large number of tiles to have a measurable exposure.
Right. I don't think it's ever been questionable where it's never been a tactical question. You know, like, I think if it was tactical, they'd be like, you better figure this shit out right now. It'd be I think that it would have ultimately been a sub-safe issue where they'd be like, you know, it might as well be a watertight issue where you're going to, you know, you'd have a sub-safe issue. So you might as well fix it now where it's just this questionable thing where we always joke about it. You know, just tiles fall off. Whatever. Everybody's tiles fall off, you know. The UK tile fall. US, it's everybody. So.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So we'll see where the lawsuit goes. Maybe something gets exposed during discovery and new facts come up.
Right, yeah. One of the things I've always been fascinated with I mean, sonar just in general fascinates me. Just part of the reason is the whole mythology, or the whole thing behind it, how it's so secretive. Very, very, very little information gets out of, like I was saying, the different CW ways, the FM ways, everything. How it, you know, everyone just thinks sonar is that basic, you know, that pinging sound from World War II. One of the fascinating things that I've read about, and I think you've talked about, is how you can actually identify this specific boat in a class of Russian submarines or whoever else based on like a little nick or a little the deformation in the propeller, right? So you can really pick that, even something that small, up, which is incredible to me.
I suppose that's an example. Yeah, you know, if somebody had a unique trait, every hull, by the way, every submarine, every ship has something unique about it. Even if it's built by the same shipyard, it's because it's such a complex machine. It has its own unique signature. And so what you do as a sonar tech is you try to learn, you know, what does Typhoon Hull 4 have that Typhoon Hull 5 does not have? And those little differences there. That's really the level of intelligence we like to get. Tracking in a Kula or whatever submarine is great and fun and important. But we really want to know is what makes this hull different than the other ones. And now the nick and the screw is an example that would be true, but a more realistic example are the auxiliary systems. A lot of submarines, even though they have the same hydraulic plant
and everything,
same class, same hydraulic plant, but different age of hydraulic pumps. And so one pump is just a little more wobbly than the one on this hull. And so we've got a slightly different variation in the frequency. And we're like, okay, we know that that's Hull 2 because he's got this line versus everybody else has the 50 hertz line or whatever. And so that's what we try to do. And that is the real secret stuff. There's those numbers we cannot go into,
right.
But that's what we do in sonar is we're not just tracking the submarines, we're really listening to them in detail. Think of it as you're going to a concert and you're listening to all the different guitarists and you're identifying the sound coming out of the bass guitarist as compared to the rhythm guitarist. That's what we do. We separate the instruments in sonar.
It's really incredible how much information you can get just from sound. I've always been a video guy. You know, I went to school for visual effects and motion graphics. So I've always been the video guy. You can make the most incredible visual effects possible, but I mean, it's nothing without the sound. The sound really adds a whole new level to it. But how? So that information you're talking about from the auxiliary systems. So if you're picking up that information, that's something you would pass on to the next sonar tech after you. So you retire, right? That all that information is carried on. And then also, how long does that information last? So we were going back to talking about Russian submarines being somewhat more almost for propaganda purposes, not quite as much maintenance, I guess, as you would say, as U.S. subs. Will that information be good for a while, or are they going to replace some of these systems that are a little bit more noisy than the other ones that can help identify one boat from another boat?
All right, so here's how it works. Let's say Jive Turkey goes on mission, and I record a submarine. And I record a submarine, 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 and I record a submar that recording gets boxed up, literally in a cardboard box, with all my logs and stuff, and my notes, all the notes that I made on my stack, and it gets sent off to the Office of Naval Intelligence. They then correlate all the data that I brought and add it to everybody else's data, because there's other submarines doing their missions too, and they publish these memos, if you will. They're like quarterlies of all the newest, latest information on all the different hulls that we've tracked in the last, say, 3 months. And then every boat gets it. It gets disseminated to the entire fleet. I don't know if it goes to surface fleet, but it definitely goes to all the submarines. And we keep these secret memos, locked away in a safe, and we train and we read what other ships have been doing, while we were doing our mission. So that information stays active in the fleet until it is superseded. And a lot of times it's not superseded until that hull, Typhoon Hull 2 or whatever, is decommissioned. That's how long that information can last. And that's kind of the process. It goes from my notes, my logs, my recording, to O&I, to the entire fleet.
So do you think that that information is the same when it comes to navigation and like we heard with the San Francisco hitting the underwater mountain and all that stuff? Do you think that if there is a failure in information, do you think it comes from that same route?
Well, with the San Francisco, right, that did not, I guess that mountain wasn't on their chart. That's what I understand anyway.
It's uncharted, right?
Yeah, it was uncharted. So then it would be added to everybody else's chart. And I don't think anybody was held at fault in that case.
Right. Nobody knew at that point. But there were some old charts, but it is what it is. Same thing with Sonar, right? It's all information, right? It may not be a mountain, but it may be Simpo class or something we don't know about, right? Something secret, right? So that information becomes super important, where you may not run into a mountain, but you may miss a Simpo class, like this new North Korean submarine that has supposedly 3 Pukoksong 3 SLBMs that may be a secondary asset to North Korea.
Yeah, and real quick, Jive, if I can follow that up with another question. So really, what do you make of North Korean submarine fleet? And I know a lot of people think it's kind of, they laugh at it, they scoff at the idea of North Koreans fleet and calling them, untechnical, really kind of just putting them down. But are they operating? So they're starting to develop they're SSBs, right? They're not nuclear.
Right. They're diesel boats with ballistic missiles on them.
Exactly. Yep.
So here's an important thing to note right away. What makes North Korea different than, say, South Korea, China, and Japan is that North Korea is not building a new submarine. They're taking a very old Romeo and turning it into a ballistic missile.
Stretching it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they did stretch out the hull. We estimate 10 or 12 feet. We're not sure. And I guess just enough room to put some ballistic missiles in it.
Yeah.
Right. And the sail.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And it appears, and I have no reason to doubt this, that they did successfully launch one ballistic missile, I guess this week or last week.
Yep.
But recently.
From a test platform.
That appears to be legit. Yeah.
Right.
So it looks like it works. Now, how quiet and capable it is. One, the Romeo is not quiet. It is not fast. It's not capable. But when it has a nuclear weapon, you got to give it some respect. Obviously, if we went into a shooting war, that thing would not last the day. But we have to have an asset in the area to take care of it.
Right. So when it comes to, let's say, this North Korean submarine that we think has 3 ballistic missile submarines, or three ballistic missiles on it. What I always hear and what I always assume is we have an asset in the area that will track it, right? And I think that one of the big changes is it's not just we don't have an SSN in the area. We have a UUV. We have a some type of robot in the area that can track this thing. It's not just we have to have the USS Hampton off the coast waiting for it to leave.
Right.
We have,
if we want to think it, we have to have the Hampton.
Yeah,
but if we want to track it, we could use anything.
Yeah, we have 40 UUVs just sitting on the dirt waiting for this thing to leave, and we're just gonna basically magnetize these things to the side. They always talk about the transparent ocean, right? The transparent. We don't need submarines anymore because the oceans have become transparent, right? So if we
That's
were,
the goal.
If we were to have this Simpo class, so if we were North Korea and we had a Simpo class submarine, this three missile submarine sitting off the side, but you got to get it from North Korea to the United States, California, right? Good luck, because we could have all these robots sitting off the side and they could just attach to it, right?
Yeah.
One of the funny things that the United States deployed at one time were these they called them flappy magnets, where these magnets they could drop these magnets on top of your boat and they would attach to the side and they would flop. They would make this floppy noise. So the United States thought this was like an actual thing they could do, where they could just dump these magnets on top of what they thought was a submarine, because they're not going to drop depth charges. They would drop these floppy magnets, and these magnets would essentially attach to the submarine, and then as the submarine was driving through the ocean, it would flop. It would make this noise and would make it trackable.
Really?
The problem was they would drop these magnets and they would attach to the bottom of their own ships. And they floppy magnets is a great thing. But
That's a real program. I don't know where you heard that, but that is a real thing.
yeah, floppy magnets.
Is this a program you shouldn't be talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Who's ever listening to this, you guys better.
I know that.
No.
I want everybody at O&I to know I didn't say shit.
Right.
No, they've been around for a long time. Yeah.
It was Eric Marino who said that.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, it was Eric Marino. Okay.
Blame it on me.
So everyone who was listening, you guys get all this information, but we're probably all going to be in jail at the end of this.
I was just blowing shit tanks I don't know anything about.
Right. So it's interesting, Jive. You mentioned that the Simpo class. I think you specifically said. I know you're just kind of stating it kind of shortly, that it might not last a day, right? But that's almost my opinion of it is that that's all it needs to last. It needs
That's
to.
right,
It's going to stay in port, and in the event of a war, it's going to go out there. It's going to get maybe a couple hundred miles from port. That's it. It's not going all the way to California. It's not going to make it anywhere else. It's going to get out there a little bit, and it's going to launch on Japan or South Korea or other U.S. assets in Guam or
Guam.
Okinawa or different places
Guam is
like
toast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
It's their secondary asset.
So that's it. It kind of reminds me, and now I could be wrong about this, a similar tactic that the Soviets used. Now, do you agree with that? Because I always, from what I understood, the Soviets kind of had a bastion defense policy where they kind of kept their boats in port. And in the event of a war, then the SSBNs would go out, launch their missiles, and they didn't expect to live very long. They would just go out there and fire them, and that was pretty much the end. Unlike the U.S., where these things are actively running deterrent patrols, different sections of the ocean.
Yeah.
You think that's how they're going to
our
use it?
SSBNs go much farther away from home than theirs ever did. But to be honest, because of geography and where USSR is located, they never had to go very far to threaten us, because their ports are so close to the Arctic Circle that it's like he did his round the world trip in 10 minutes. They don't have to go very far to be very near US.
Exactly.
Whereas our ports are a lot farther from the Arctic Circle, where the world is a lot wider, so we have to travel farther to get to where we need to go.
Right.
But about the SSBNs, that was the big thing with the Typhoon, is the Typhoon could launch her ballistic missiles pier side and hit parts of America with the SSN-20. So that was a huge development that came out in the 70s and 80s, I want to say.
Yeah, you saw a lot of photos of them just shooting missiles on their port. Could you imagine, like, the USS Florida just pulling into to San Diego and just launching a nuke in port? It's never going to happen, but Russia don't give a fuck.
Well, I think the interesting thing about the Soviet Union
Now, our RBNs don't do that, but we did shoot a water slug topside with us in port, which was kind of hilarious to shoot this water out.
Right.
Did we lose you again?
Yeah, I think that was the was the one that looked like a big pink penis.
Oh, no. Yeah. I thought it was a mushroom.
Yeah.
That one was one of the older 40 for Freedom SSBNs.
Oh, that's
but
right.
still the same, ejection system.
Yeah, same deal.
That's really cool how that works, by the way.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go into it.
Another.
It's not like launching a torpedo tube. It's completely different.
Right, when you talk
And
about
it's pretty awesome. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to tease you guys like that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Well,
too.
one interesting thing I did learn from you is you were. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of that movie. The movie came out like maybe 6 months ago, a year ago. It was about submarine hunter killer.
Hunter killer.
Yeah.
You were talking about how they showed Soviet submarine, Russian submarine doing a thing called ice picking. I thought that was incredible. I had never heard of that until you actually talked about it.
No, that's a real tactic. They do that.
Yeah. Is that anything you ever experienced, or can you go into any more detail on that? That's fascinating.
Well, I experienced them doing it. We never did it because the first flight 688, we never had the reinforced sail. So we could never ice pick ourselves. But we would just tool around them as they were ice picking because they weren't going anywhere.
Right.
So we were just waiting for them to move again and shoot trash and make all the other... Here's the thing about ice picking is it's not quiet. Because as you're resting against the ice, that ice is creaking and crackling. Right. And then what does make noise is everything else on the submarine appears amplified because you're not making any background noise. So you hear the crew opening and shutting doors. You hear the watch turnover announcements.
Wow.
All that stuff gets projected into the water.
So
you don't have as much machinery noise.
So it bounces off the ice. And it makes it like a wall.
Yeah.
Well, either that or just having the submarine stationed against the ice, it makes the vibrations even more intense. Wow. Amplifying it.
Yeah, you just tend to hear it more clearly. And so we'll just tool around and be like, hey, they're changing again, as we're doing our thing.
Interesting.
And these submarines get into routines. Here's the cool thing about tracking the same submarine for 4 or 5 weeks is after the first couple days, their routine. They're like, Charlie's getting ready to shoot trash again, and sure enough, there goes the trash. And then here come all the shrimp because they're eating the trash.
The other thing is, I know a lot of people talk about submarines sitting on the bottom of the ocean. Obviously, there's a certain depth they can get to, the crush depth and everything. But you're closer into the continental shelf and things like that. It's only a couple hundred meters deep. How quiet are those really? Could a North Korean sub or an Iranian sub sit at the bottom of the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf? I'm sorry, or somewhere out in the
Gulf of Mexico.
There. Oh, okay. Anywhere. Yeah.
Parts of Gulf of Mexico. Yeah.
So how real would that be? Completely quiet? Was that something you could pick up? Or is that a major
I imagine
threat?
it would be a lot like ice picking, where you would depend on their crew making mistakes, slamming hatches and whatnot. Doing maintenance. Whenever they have to do maintenance and they're using a wrench on metal to turn a bolt, you hear that. So again, if they're on the bottom, and our submarines don't do that, by the way. We can't do that the way they're designed. But their submarines are designed to sit on the bottom and not get stuck in the mud. And they're very quiet when they do that. But if they're doing any operations, maintenance, things like that, if they're making any announcements, instead of hearing background noise of just nothing, you hear this voice in a foreign language coming through the water. And you're like, oh, apparently he's over there now, And so you get a bearing on them because they made that transient. It's all about crew discipline. The more quiet you make the submarine, the crew has to be as quiet or quieter than the submarine.
Right, because
I've tracked a lot of submarines based on crew.
Yeah, it's just transients, right? Because at least in our training, when it comes to the Thresher and the Scorpion, we've learned that is an importance, right? We know that maintenance is going to kill you. We also know that sound could kill you, and when it comes to just basic transients in general, you could drop just drop the plastic rim on a toilet bowl, right? You could drop a wrench. As a torpedoman, we would be trained to do war games against other submarines, right? But if the submarine
you guys make a ton of noise down in the torpedo room,
right? If the submarine,
y'all a bunch of monkeys down there,
right?
Hanging on shit,
and we would do that shit, like you said. We would do that because if we were so quiet and they couldn't find us, we would take a wrench and we would go ding, 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 ding,
yeah,
ding.
That's
and
whenever we're doing war games,
we would hit the hull. We would hit the hull. Like, we are going to be the
target.
This country, this X country, and we are going to do this thing. bang on this hull. Ba, 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 ba.
Is that cheating though?
It is cheating. It's
not
totally
cheating.
cheating.
I got 2 submariners each saying a separate thing.
Well,
Who do I
as a
believe?
torpedoman is cheating.
I'll go with the
so
sonar
here's
tech.
how the war game works: is you've got 2 submarines that are very quiet. Say it's us and a UK boat, a Trafalgar class, and we can't hear each other. No training happens, and we waste each other's time. So then we do take on the role of, say, that Iranian diesel boat doing maintenance, and then he's
right.
down in the torpedo room banging away.
And I'm
So
banging
it's
on the
actually
boat.
a scripted event, and I don't know if the torpedomen know this, but it is there's a schedule. For 15 minutes, we make transients at this time, and then no transients for the next 12 hours or whatever.
Right.
But it's all pre-scripted.
Right.
Now, I cannot remember the name for the life of me of the documentary. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's a war games with an Australian boat against the U.S. Navy. I don't know if you've come across that documentary.
Someone sent me a 6-episode YouTube series. Was it 6 episodes?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
think it was
never
only
mind.
one
It
part.
was like on the Collins class.
Yeah. It might have been, but they play. So the one interesting thing about it, I think I watched this shortly after I watched your video about an active sonar, and it sounded, and the sounds they were playing, they had a camera crew down on the boat, and they were playing sounds that sounded very similar to the one you had played. So I'm sure it was much more, it was probably almost realistic actual sonar, active sonar sounds. So. The narrative of this documentary goes is they were off the coast, I think, of California somewhere. They're running this war game, and this Australian, probably the Collins class, but it was an Australian class boat, and the U.S. Navy, they were trying to get past, and the U.S. Navy was trying to pick them up and detect them, and they were trying to go around the side of an island. It's really unfortunate I can't think of this documentary name or show it, but they were saying in the documentary that the U.S. Navy ended up cheating. So you were not supposed to use active sonar. And then they turned on, they couldn't find the Australian boat, so they turned on active sonar, and they were, pinging away, and you heard all this sound going on in the boat. And they still made it past. They got right up to a U.S. Ship, and they showed the submarine, and they started blasting, I come from a land down under. To really kind of rub it into the U.S. Navy. I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't know the name of the documentary, but
I think it was San Clemente Island, because we're that's right off
maybe.
the coast of California, and that's where our war games. That and Santa Catalina Island. God, I think that was the documentary I watched. Yeah, it was Collins class.
So what do you make of that? Is that a problem? Do you see in the U.S. Navy? Is there any sort of lack of? Because one thing I always notice with the U.S. military in general is that it is such a large beast that it is so hard to turn around, right, and make an adjustment. Or is that not true in your opinion or your experience, where you have a new technology come in, and since it's such a large animal, it's like you're driving a semi-truck. It's hard to make a U-turn and to change course and to go in a different direction in terms of adjusting to new technologies and new threats that emerge.
Well, I'll tell you right now, in today's environment, if an admiral of having a brand new aircraft carrier or 3 new Virginia-class submarines, he's going to take the aircraft carrier every single time.
Right.
Just because admirals love big boats with big staterooms with a great ocean view, and all that on the carriers.
Yeah,
it's like their own personal cruise ship.
No windows on a submarine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no windows on a sub, and we don't even let the admirals on unless they invite them.
Yeah, good
We
luck.
can't say no to the admiral. But they don't come on our boats that often. But the reason why they like the big ships is that because it's also like a big, political tool. Once you become a flag officer, you become half politician, half military man, because you have to lobby Congress for money.
Right.
And so one of the best ways to get money for Congress is to invite them down to the shipyard and get a tour of the latest nuclear aircraft carrier with all the systems. And, it's huge. And it's a really impressive machine.
Right.
And a submarine is impressive too, but it's no aircraft carrier.
Right.
So, and plus, like I said, they just like the aircraft carrier a lot more. But the problem with that, let me get to the problem, because that was what the question was. The aircraft carriers are so flippin' vulnerable. Every single war game I was a part of where we had to sink an aircraft carrier, we did multiple flippin' times. And it's so easy to do in a war game. Now, if it just happened once in a while, I wouldn't even bat an eye. But because I have 20 years of experience of doing it consistently, I can identify it as a problem because it's a pattern. But whenever an American warship submarine goes into a naval game and sinks the carrier, the Navy calls it a victory because it's our submarines doing a great job. Nobody ever flips it around and says, "What's wrong with the carrier?" The carrier's so vulnerable. We can penetrate that ASW screen so easily, and it happens all the time with diesel boats. Diesel boats are very quiet boats, especially whenever they have a good crew, like his documentary, The Collins Class, got in there and did that. The Gotland class from Sweden
the Gotland.
came over here and
destroyed our carriers.
They did so well in 2004. We paid for them to stay for another year, 2005, and for 24 months they kicked our ass off the coast of California.
I was in San Diego. I was that submarine that tested them. Yeah, I love those guys, man.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they were awesome. I never got a chance to meet them. But it really exposed the vulnerability of our carrier group. And that was 2004, 2005. Here we are 15 years. Not anything changed.
No.
We're still building more and more carriers because the admirals like them.
Yep.
And it's easy to get money for them compared to actual war machines like a submarine. If you go to war, you better have a submarine because those carriers are going to go away if the other team's submarines are competent.
Yeah, and ASW is something I've always been fascinated at too. So what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses to that. So if you're running ASW from a carrier, I mean, are you even going to pick up a Russian sub, creeping close to it? Do you have a good chance? I mean, the U.S. used to have the S3, right? The Viking, that would run ASW from an aircraft compared to just helicopters like we use today. What do you think the weaknesses are to ASW today? Is there things we can improve on to better protect these carriers, expensive carriers?
Here's the biggest weakness in the United States Navy right now, and it's the surface, the training of the surface sonarmen. The surface sonarmen do not recognize a submarine contact when they see it.
Exactly.
That needs to be fixed. The
It's
equipment
obvious.
is good. The equipment is performing as designed. We're not training our sailors to operate the equipment to the level that they should be operating it at.
Exactly.
And I really hate to say it, and I'm not saying that out of malice or pride for myself. It's something that we really got to fix.
And we see it with they're running into cargo ships and shit. I mean, they just have poor training in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're exhausted. There's a lot of exhaustion Navy-wide.
Horrible.
That was a big part of the collisions that have going on a couple years ago.
Right.
Where sadly a lot of people died because on a surface ship, you got more than sonar. You got radar. You got lookouts. Everybody failed in those collisions. Everybody did.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking about sending emails on Gmail and shit. I mean, there was so
Using
many
Garmin
failures.
GPS,
oh God, just
There
so
were
many
a lot- there's
failures
a lot
on that
to
shit.
it.
But yeah, those guys need to be trained just as specific as our submariners, right?
Right. They need to, and they're not. Those are two different school pipelines. And the submariners have much more intensive training than the surface guys.
Right.
And it's really not fair to the surface guys because
Right.
we have to hold them to the same standard as we hold our submariners.
Right.
But we don't give them the same training. And then they fail. And then we say, well, the submarines are doing great. And then that's where it stops. Nobody ever analyzes the problem that they have with the surface. So
do you think that-
hopefully somebody hearing this will make a change.
Yeah. So you think that's one thing they can streamline and make a much more efficient is maybe going through the same schooling with the same type of teachers as the submariners use for sonar as the surface
Yeah,
ships.
just resources.
Yeah.
Sound propagation physics are the same, regardless of if you're in the water or on the water.
Right.
So they should definitely start in the same school
Right, and
learn the basics.
Right, and the thing about surface ships is they're always on the surface. They don't need to worry about layers. I mean, I guess they have to a little bit, but like they're always on that same plane, right?
Well, they have
they're not submariners where they're always on a different plane where they have to learn so much.
Well,
there's no
here's the deal:
excuse
they
for
do
the
need to
submarine.
worry about the layers, and they don't worry
Right.
about the layers.
Right.
One question I have for you, actually, from the YouTube comments. This is actually a really good question, I thought. Cannon Fodder 43. So we talk a lot about, the U.S. tracking and following Russian subs, right? You know, you pick up and you can listen to them, the shift changes and all that stuff, and or using a wrench and maintenance and all that. Has there ever been an experience in your career that you can talk about at least where the tables were turned, where it was all of a sudden you guys picked up a Russian submarine that has been tracking you guys for a while? Because we heard a lot about the, now I forget the name of it, SOX. Now their detection system, it had different things.
Yep.
The wake detection system, where it could pick up different radioactive nuclear things in the water from the U.S. submarines.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So has there ever been an experience, at least in your career, or is there anything you could speak to on that?
Yeah, I don't have any firsthand experience of being counter detected, thankfully. I went my entire career without that happening. But there are times whenever the Akula 2, okay, so the Akula got an upgrade midlife, I want to say late 90s maybe, where it got some extra quieting and sound silencing and became very quiet. And we started calling it the Akula 2. There's also an Akula 3. But the Akula 2 disappeared. It was no longer in port. We didn't know where she was. And about 6 weeks later, because that's about the length of their deployment, they don't do the 3 and 6 month deployments we tend to do. She popped her Snoop Tray surface radar off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, and let it run for a minute, and then ran her ass back home. So that's an example of a successful deployment from the North Sea, the Barents Sea, the Northern Fleet, down to the eastern coastline for we estimate to be 5 to 6 weeks, and we had no idea. She got across our SOSUS lines, didn't even hear, which that's pretty incredible because our SOSUS system is pretty sensitive, but she was able to get past the SOSUS without being detected.
Right. There's a famous story about the 4 Foxtrots that got supposedly across our SOSUS lines and they didn't know it, and we tracked them down and went through that whole stuff. But
yeah,
wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
If it was Foxtrots, that would have been 60s maybe.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
That was when they started to figure out that we had SOSUS lines, right?
Yeah, right around there. Yeah. So that brings up an interesting question. I don't know how much you can speak to this, but SOSUS has always been a fascinating topic, at least for me. It seems like a lot of, at least the public information out there, has been that they really haven't maintained the system as much as they did during the Cold War. Now, I know Eric has talked about how they will cross-use some information from NOAA, right?
Right.
Like I said, I don't know if you could speak to it, but is there more research you think that's going on behind the scenes? Is there more systems out there that we don't know about that they're keeping up with this, or is it kind of slacked off a lot after the Cold War?
Well, okay, both actually. So yeah, the SOSUS is not being maintained as much as it was during the Cold War, but because the infrastructure is in place, it only needs bare bone maintenance just to work. Mm-hmm. So it's not as bad as it sounds. But there are new systems that we won't talk about on this podcast that are taking the place of SOSUS.
Huh. Where like you see the guys with the IUSS.
A pin or something? Or?
Pins, awards, right? There's always a deep submergence. There's always guys that are doing more. I won't say more. More.
You won't say more, but you'll say more.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating what's going on there because, again, from an outsider's perspective, if anything, it seems like they're probably working on something there. But at the same time, just after the end of the Cold War, we thought we won, right? We were the winners. We were the only superpower remaining. And,
we certainly acted like it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we kind of let off a lot of the innovation, a lot of the technology. A lot of it kind of remained the same. There were some few upgrades here and there, and a lot of interoperability and networks and stuff like that, and sensors. But for the most part, we actually
increased our tempo and cut our budget. That was the 90s.
Right.
Well, that's what I was going to. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. Actually, we can go to that question instead. Was what kind of transition do you really see from the Cold War period to the post-Cold War period? Was there any major? Like you said, there was obviously a budget cut. Yeah. Was it a real tough time?
It was very tough for submarines because once the Cold War was declared over, which that didn't happen at like one moment. Exactly. It just kind of became a thing around 2000 or 1992, I guess, ish, 1993 maybe. When submarines were looking for a mission, we were like, we want to go do something because the Russians aren't going to sea anymore. There was a period of time, 1992 to 1993, where they didn't hardly have anybody go to sea for that year. and because it was in such turmoil, right? They didn't trust their captains to come back, Hunt for Red October style.
Huh.
So they didn't let them go to sea.
Wow.
And so even though they did a little bit, but it wasn't like a regular tempo.
Right.
So we didn't have a job. We were going up to the Barents, coming home empty-handed, and that had never happened before. And so we got on this drug war thing where we started sending our boys down to South America, helping out the Coast Guard down there. And that's now a regular thing. That's part of our job now. We do as much for the drug war as the Coast Guard does. Just the Coast Guard gets to bang on the hatch of the
right.
hull.
Yeah. You're not going to pull up in a submarine. Yeah.
Right.
I want to do that part. But we'll let us do it. But we're down there whenever those drug boats come out into the deeper water. Our submarines are there waiting for them, going, "Yep, there he is, boys. Go get him." And we help them if they don't have them already on radar, which sometimes they don't.
Right.
We help them out with sonar.
Yeah, that's one of the things you don't hear about on the whole Coast Guard Twitter feeds is that you see the guy banging on the boat on top of the boat, but where'd they get that info from?
Yeah.
Yeah, where'd they come from?
Or something
Came
in the
from
air
us.
or a submarine. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, they do have P8s in the air. There's multiple.
Oh yeah.
We spend so much money down there on the drug war. It's
It is really,
Right.
it really is crazy.
Right, we're down there because of Altec, right? We have a special training area that we're down there, kind of already down there anyways. Here's this weird thing, we don't know what it is. Well, fair enough, but it's close enough. We hear this thing and we don't know what it is. What is this thing coming out of this place?
Yeah.
And, so it's got to be tough because you went from the Cold War. And like you said, there was never one real clear line where it was, okay, we got, we're confronting this almost on par superpower to nothing. It was a transition from Soviets are starting to run less and less, sub missions, for lack of better words. And then it slowly kind of phased out to nothing or to almost nothing. It's got to be hard to keep the knowledge. Right, like you have all these captains that are very experienced. They're used to running against the Soviets against a much more equal foe, if that's the right word to use. Right. To now you're going to go off the coast of Libya and launch a few Tomahawk cruise missiles or Al Qaeda, who doesn't have any submarines, obviously.
Right.
To keep that knowledge.
Battle in a while.
Right, to keep that knowledge, to keep it from the Cold War or this lack of 30 years, 20 years, whatever it's been. To now we're actually seeing the rise of things like China or Russia again, where it's becoming a major concern for the U.S. Navy. And a lot of that knowledge, I wonder how much has been lost or because you really need to maintain that over time, right? Yeah,
you do. And the Navy, to their credit, does do a good job of maintaining the knowledge with onshore trainers where they can put that new Akula or the new Yasin into a trainer simulator and then work with that information as if it's real. The simulation is just like being at sea as far as the computer screen goes. It looks and feels the same. But what they really lack is the experience because, of course, the experience isn't happening anymore. And until now, China's beginning to become a real problem and they're expanding their they're pushing out from their shores intentionally, projecting naval power, and that's something America has to deal with in 20 years, if not longer. Almost 30 years now, I guess. Right. And so, this generation that is on the submarines today never had to deal with that before. It's going to be interesting to see how they react. How well they do. I can tell you, the SSGNs, those crews that I certified were freaking badass. But even those guys are probably retired now too. Most of them.
Last question I had to ask. So we talk a lot about China and a lot about Russia. What do you make of? I know you had a video not too long ago about the Indian, the Arihan.
The Arihan.
Yeah, they famously had the what was the hatch they left open?
Yeah,
were flooded. They've had a few different. It seems like a lot of trial and error there. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously, there's people losing their lives. It's devastating, but. So what do you make of their program? It seems like they're trying to rush along because they have two foes really they have to go against. Pakistan, which doesn't have the largest submarine force, but then also China. China is obviously
China. Yeah, exactly. I was wondering if you were going to say China. Yeah, exactly.
Something they're trying to deter against.
India's got a very special and unique relationship with a superpower, and in this case, it's Russia, where they're leasing the advanced planes and then buying them. It's like leasing. They did that with the Akula 2, and they're also getting nuclear technology from Russia. That was part of the video that I made about them. I'm really impressed with how India became a nuclear power in the environment that it came up in the 60s and 70s, and did it legitimately. And I think that with the help of Russia, they're going to build more and more capable submarines, and will become the dominant force in the Indian Ocean navally.
Interesting.
I really think that they're going to own that. But we'll have to wait and see. They're not there yet. I mean, they're still making really dumb mistakes, like the one you pointed out.
Yeah.
But as long as Russia keeps working with them, they're going to become a competent power to deal with. And like you said, they've got two borders that they are not. I guess they're pushing back at Kashmir right now or something. There's a lot of tensions going on between Pakistan and even China. If you remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, there was a real border dispute between China building a road to a different country, but I guess was going through India. And India was like, you can't build a road here. This is our country, you know?
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the Belt and Road, man. What a program that is. Now, that's shifting gears. That's a Chinese program, obviously not an Indian one. But they're buying up ports around the world.
Right.
And China is really becoming an economic powerhouse. They've got problems right now, obviously. But if they continue this Belt and Road program, they're going to end up owning major ports globally.
Oh, yeah.
So they can base their navy out of ports in Greece and, Egypt or wherever they're buying these ports from.
Right. Not including the South China Sea and all this crazy shit they're building out there.
Yeah, they're building islands and putting military bases on them.
Right.
They're militarizing the Spratly Islands.
Right.
And nobody is confronting them, because to confront them would possibly start a war that nobody wants.
Right.
And China knows this, and that's how they're getting away with it.
Right.
So it's a mess.
Yeah, we just send a random DDG in there.
Yeah, like we're going to do a freedom of navigation exercise. Yeah.
Right.
It really is interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Iran. Both China and Iran, I think they're kind of pushing as far as they can, because they know there's really not going to be much pushback. So, for example, it seems, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible. It seems, it seems almost like it was absolutely Iran that launched those attacks against the Saudi oil industry. Now I know the Houthi in Yemen claimed responsibility for it, but all the evidence seems to point toward it was Iran. They know Saudi Arabia really can't do anything back. Saudi Arabia has a lot of money and they have a very modern military, but there's really, Iran has such a large asymmetrical force and even conventional force that there's really they can't do anything. I mean, they're just stuck there. And then the same thing with China, like with the Philippines, for example. I'm sure you've seen recently how Chinese fishing boats are ramming into the Philippine fishing boats and unfortunately killing some people. And there's really nothing the Philippines can do back. It's just they can continue to push this, and they know they're not going to get they're not going to have anyone coming back at them. So it's a very interesting dynamic we have now with those two countries, at least. This is
Saudi Arabia doesn't have the capability of maintaining a military force in Iran. They don't have the logistics. They can't do it.
Right. Yeah. It's a very interesting time we live in right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate you being on for so long. Minus the technical difficulties, I think you're the longest guest we've had on a podcast so far. We're about 2.5 hours into it, so we'll start to wrap up here. Is there anything you wanted to cover? I know you kind of talked about your sub briefs.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've moved my sub briefs off of YouTube, a private server, and you can access those if you want to see my detailed submarine brief on patreon.com/Jive Turkey. And what the sub brief is I take a class of submarine, like the Victor 1 and the Typhoon class, and I talk about it in detail for 30 to 50 minutes with pictures and the history, construction, operations, and if it applies, the decommissioning as well. So the entire life of one class of submarine per brief. We're doing a couple of those a month, and it's only $1. I recommend anybody that's interested in my stories, and because I throw some of my own experiences in there as well, and the sub briefs, to check out my patreon.com/Jive Turkey and see if it's something for you.
Yeah, seriously, for $1, seriously, you can't beat that. I mean, just for what we talk about on this podcast, just in the past 2 hours has been amazing. But getting that specific information on the Victor 1 or the Victor 2, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally worth $1. I mean, you should totally throw your dollar in there. I'm not saying you shouldn't throw your dollar at us, but you should totally throw it at Jive Turkey.
Yeah, definitely throw it.
Well,
I'll dance for your $1, baby.
There you go.
Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you came on. Like I said, Eric and I talked. We talk a lot about what kind of guests we can get on, and your name came up very, very early.
Yeah.
And we were glad we finally were able to work it out where you were able to be on the podcast. And not only that, but you're our first live guest.
All right, cool. It's great to be live.
Hopefully not the last.
Yeah, sorry if we
all
had
these technical
all
difficulties.
these technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Well, I know whenever you guys move to the studios, you'll have much better.
Oh man, yeah.
Hopefully, we'll probably be paying for it, so it
seriously.
better be such.
Better be better, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up here, Jeff?
Nothing. I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me on. This has been, and I'd love to come on again anytime you guys want.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
thank you for being on.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. This has been a very, very
Thanks
interesting
for letting
podcast.
us for host you through this sort of shit show that we were going through tonight with our
right.
information and everything else. So.
All right. Well, if that's it, if we have nothing else to cover, I think we'll wrap up here. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye.